And where's this come from? What got you interested in working with the? I mean, I think the intro, people are fascinated by the human mind. People are fascinated by the crime genre. They watch programs and they get, I want to know about the serial killer. I want to know about that murderer. What made them do that? What made you get into this field?
So I think I've always had a bit of a fascination with criminality. Even when I was a kid, I used to listen to gangster rap. I used to love all those mob films, Goodfellas, Scarface. Oddly, my parents, even though my parents were very strict, they had no qualms with me watching really violent films since I was a kid.
Right.
So I always had that kind of fascination as an observer. I never wanted to commit violence myself, but I was just drawn to violence, gangs, the mafia.
Okay.
And I suppose a lot of people are really, aren't they? That's why true crime is so popular.
Mm.
Then I did medicine, so psychiatrists are doctors first. And I have to say, nothing really attracted me. I didn't click with any of my many subspecialties in medicine that I had to go through, GP placement, surgery, all of that stuff, until I did psychiatry. And I think I was drawn into just stepping into the crazy delusional worlds that some people have that have like very severe mental illness, or helping them at their lowest ebb. So post-suicide would be a suicide attempt would be a typical presentation. So then I started training in psychiatry. And when you do that as a junior doctor, you go through all your placements, usually 6 months at a time. And almost on a whim, I did a 6-month stint in a medium secure unit in North London. And there were 14 men on the ward, at least half of whom had killed somebody in the past, and they all had severe mental illnesses to have been sectioned to this unit in the first place. And to me, Mark, it was their backstories that really drew me in. So all of them have a reason. They have a story, whether that's, physical or sexual abuse, being the victims of, witnessing domestic violence between their parents, poverty, drug and alcohol use is a huge factor. So for me, that's what I liked about it. Is piecing together the puzzle of why they got a mental illness and why they committed such horrific violence. And often it's the same kind of factors.
You see, that's really interesting. I've stopped now. I did a tour for a year with my book. One of the questions, there's repeated questions get asked at the end of every talk. One of the question that I got, I think, asked almost every single time was, is it nature? Is it nurture? What is the influence of young people in terms of their social environment on their offending behavior? Now, I'm very clear is that the way you're brought up, what you're exposed to, you're kind of children of blank canvas. You learn and you make a decision, of course you do, but actually the influence of what's around you, what's acceptable, what becomes that pattern of behavior really influences you. You alluded to seeing violence, the computer games, that whole image. Where do you think that sits in terms of how children are now living their lives?
Sure. So the ultimate question, nature or nurture, I think most professionals would accept that it's a bit of both, right? So in terms of nature, so your natural instincts and your personality, there are things that lead to offending, lead to violence, like a natural lack of empathy, impulsivity, proneness to boredom, opportunism. So these kinds of people are more likely to offend, to commit violence. But I would argue that is interesting, but it's not really that helpful in terms of treatment or rehabilitation, because you can't change somebody's nature. Nurture, on the other hand, so the environments they grow up in, is far more malleable as a professional, as society, social services. And the vast majority of the cases I've seen have some of those things in their background. So, either having very, very lax parenting, so neglectful parents, or overbearing, strict parents who are actually borderline abusive. So children that suffer from that violence at the hands of their parents, they kind of repeat that cycle. So they drift towards what's familiar. And there's more mechanisms to that. There's also that they feel like this inferiority complex, and they feel that because my father used to beat my mother, used to beat me, every relationship in the future, even subconsciously, they feel that there has to be a power dynamic. And I hated being the victim, so I'd rather be the aggressor in that situation. So it's all kind of connected.
And what do you think about, so there was some time ago, there was a piece of work that was done. It was kind of inspired, but it wasn't fully explored by the RSPCA in relation to making a correlation between violence against animals and human violence, when people go on and commit not just domestic violence, but the murders. Have you ever looked at any of that? Are you aware of studies that looked at whether or not there is any correlation between, violence against animals, particularly as children grow up, and then carrying on then to adulthood against humans?
Sure. So I've not looked into it, as in I've not studied the research, simply because it's my role is only really assessing each individual defendant.
Yeah.
It's not really that it's not specifically relevant to every one case that I take on. Having
Has
said
it,
that,
does it show in itself within the work that you've done that
yeah. I was
used
just
animals?
about to say,
Right.
I can think of many cases where, so when I get sent the case papers for any individual who's on remand, one of the things I get sent is the PNC, the Police National Computer Record, their criminal record,
Yeah.
and I would say it's very common. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I'd say maybe 15 to 25% of the cases that I've seen have some kind of offence against animals in their history. And I don't I think it's a bit of a stretch to say that violence towards animals would lead for an individual
Yeah.
to be violent against humans. I don't think that's the case, but I do think that people who naturally are impulsive and aggressive and basically lack empathy, I think that's what we're talking about. If you're the kind of person that has no qualms in kicking your cat or beating your dog up because it was a present that you got and you thought that it would be this companion, and you can't control it and it doesn't do exactly what you want, so your way of dealing with that, instead of trying to teach it manners or disciplines or tricks, is to just lash out, then you're also going to be the kind of person that does that with human interactions as well. So I'm absolutely sure there is a correlation.